AFR On Demand is brought to you by Breck Golf. Try Beaver Creek today, just 20 minutes from downtown Baton Rouge in the Zachary area. They've got a PGA Tour driving range, a short game practice area, 30 to 40-yard practice shots. It's a great place to chip and putt and practice if you don't have time for a full round. Book your tee time today, golf.breck.org, golf.breck.org.
Matt Moscona.
I'm very important.
After further review.
Say it one more time.
After further review with Matt Moscona.
And here we go.
Live from the Raising Cane studio.
Let's ride!
And off we go. Welcome aboard. Glad you're with us. It is AFR, presented by Goodwood Men's Sexual Wellness. I'm Matt. We are here, Radio Row, SEC Football Media Days, Day 3. Ole Miss, Alabama, Texas A&M, Florida, all taking their turns. The first day of heavy hitters. We're going to dive into all of it, but let us begin as we do every single day.
It's time to pop the top on another edition of AFR with Bud Light. Drink easy.
Well, I think there's only one place to start, and that is with the Ole Miss Rebels taking their turn. And God dog it, really didn't want to like Pete Golding. Kidding. But look, I mean, he's a guy from Hammond, America, super likable. He sort of has the everyman mentality about him. The salt and pepper hair, the little beard, kind of like the frat boy visor you could see with little boat shoes out there on his spring break trip, maybe kicking back and throwing back a few Bud Lights. Pete Golding. He's got an everyman characteristic about him that I think most people can relate to. So it is really fascinating to see Pete Golding on this stage. As the head coach of the Ole Miss Rebels, a team that made the national semifinals a year ago, all the reasons how he came into that job with the circumstance with Lane going out, it really, I mean, there was a point in that process where it was just not going to be Pete Golding. That wasn't an option, but the Kiffin saga dragged. The available pool of candidates had really shallowed out to only Alex Golesh, and so trying to sell Ole Miss fans, boosters on Alex Golesh when you bungled the Lane Kiffin exit wasn't really tenable. And so the popular assistant got promoted, and then he won a couple of playoff games. Now, the Tulane game, there's nothing impressive about that. Tulane was not in the same stratosphere as Ole Miss. Had no business being in the college football playoff, and they got their head kicked in. Or as Jon Sumrall said earlier today, he said they kicked the expletive out of us twice. So, which he's right. But beating Georgia and then nearly beating Miami was massively impressive. And Pete Golding today was asked about the opportunity to go from defensive coordinator to head coach at Ole Miss.
You know, when you're responsible for a side of the ball, you run it like it's your team. And so no different than a defensive unit meeting, right? There's things that you believe in that you want to make sure that you get across, but you also have really good other defensive coaches that you have to allow to coach. And so, you know, when I made the transition and I knew I was still going to call the defense by talking to other people, and that's really the only reason that was keeping me from taking a head job was I loved being a coordinator, was that I was going to hire guys that have to do all the head coach bullshit that I don't enjoy doing, to where I can still focus on coaching football and being around our guys. And so part of the staff build of the Tom Lukes of the world and the Todd Cooley's of the world, right, and the Austin Thomases of the world, those guys around me, they handle all that crap, right, and they keep it off of my desk so that we can focus on still recruiting really good players and coaching good football. So your staff meeting is a little bigger than your unit meeting was, right, your team meeting is a little bigger than your defensive unit meeting was, but the principles are the same.
Gotta love when a coach, an SEC head coach, will drop a BS on the podium and not edit himself and just let her rip. That was Pete Golding today, very comfortable in his own skin. You might also imagine that a lot of the conversation with Pete Golding, Trinidad Chambliss, Kejuan Lacey, all revolved around Lane Kiffin. And Pete Golding was asked about his relationship presently with Lane Kiffin.
Lane and I are good. So, I did not know Coach Kiffin prior to taking the Ole Miss job. I think everybody just assumes Alabama. I wasn't at Alabama when Coach Kiffin was, So our relationship really grew in those 3.5 years, and he did a lot for me, and I was very, very appreciative of how he treated me and my family and learned a lot from him. So I have no ill will towards Coach Kiffin. He texts me on a regular basis, and there's certain things that we'll talk about, and there's certain things that we don't talk about. He's very competitive, just like I'm very competitive, right? And so obviously a lot of this went a different direction when now he had a new job with new responsibilities, and he's going to be super competitive to be the best that he can at that job, right, which is his job. And so I can separate the two. I know some people can't, right, but he decided what was better for him and his family, and that's for him to decide.
I think that's an answer that probably won't sit super great with Ole Miss fans. It probably feels a little like sleeping with the enemy. My hope sincerely, though, is because I'll tell you, walking up and down Radio Row here for the past 3 days, you come enough, and we've been here every year since 2012, and so you see a lot of the same people and faces and people you're friends with and colleagues, and so you do reciprocal interviews, and you do dozens of sit-downs and conversations, and everybody in every market asks the same thing. What's that Ole Miss game going to be like? What's September 19th going to be like? And I don't know completely because I'm not an Ole Miss fan. I don't live in Oxford. I don't have my finger on the pulse of that fan base every single day. I have talked to enough people, though, that have expressed concern about what that day may be like. And I do know that every fan base has its lowest common denominator. Every fan base has its Harvey Updikes that are going to go poison trees. I mean, LSU's got them. South Carolina's got them. Maybe Kentucky basketball's got them. Everybody's got them. And so Ole Miss has them, too. And that's the kind of thing where you're talking about a primetime game late at night with all the animosity and vitriol that might build up into that. And I'll tell you, the game that I went to, the time when I was in the stadium with the absolute most animus ever was 2008 LSU-Bama, when Nick Saban came back for the first time. And it was people say, oh, it was palpable. But that is the word. Like, it wasn't just fans that wanted to win a game, and so they were loud and passionate. It was anger that fueled all of that day. And Nick Saban didn't leave LSU for Alabama. He left for the Miami Dolphins. And the next year, people were actually still so grateful for Saban that when Saban came back to Tiger Stadium to coach the Dolphins against the Saints in Tiger Stadium, like, people were cheering for the Dolphins because of Nick. But when he went to Alabama and then he made the comments about, the Cajun guy in the ditch and all this sort of stuff, that's what sort of angered a lot of people and built a lot of the animus in that situation. But this is a thing where Kiffin left mid-season of a playoff team, the greatest season they've had in 60 years, and didn't just leave, left for a school they consider a longtime bitter rival, and the manner in which it happened and sort of drawing it out and dragging it out, I get it. Like, I wonder what that's going to be like. So when you have Pete Golding make those types of comments that he and Kiffin are good and that, there is no animosity there, they each have new challenges that they're focusing on, I don't know that that's the thing Ole Miss fans want to hear. I think they'd probably rather have their coach stoke their flames. Think about what Josh Heupel did on Monday when he made the crack about, hope the grocery stores are stocked with ketchup bottles and the sporting goods stores have plenty of golf balls. Like, if Pete Golding had stoked the flames, it's basically giving this sort of tacit approval to the fans to continue to ratchet that up. Now, I think when that day comes, it's going to be bonkers either way. But that was interesting. Now, the players had a very, very different feeling, approach, sound on this. Now, Trinidad Chambliss was asked, what are LSU quarterbacks getting in Lane Kiffin? This is what Chambliss said.
I'd say, the quarterbacks at LSU are going to coach with a lot of experience. Coach Kiffin has been in the college game long time, also NFL career too. But yeah, getting a good coach, solid guy.
And then Kewan Lacey was asked, what kind of coach is LSU getting?
It seemed like you and Lane Kiffin were pretty close when you were together at Ole Miss. What kind of coach is LSU getting?
They're getting a great coach.
I'll tell you, when I had a chance to spend about 2 minutes talking to Kewan Lacey earlier today, and we'll play that for you in a little bit, he was not quite as complimentary. And we'll play that for you in a bit. So ultimately, and we will go deeper dive into Ole Miss, the season ahead for them, strengths, weaknesses, all of that stuff as we move throughout the show today as they took their turn. But naturally, the other side of the Kiffin saga took their turn today. That was the headliner on a day where Alabama, who won a playoff game a year ago, was here. Texas A&M, who hosted a playoff game a year ago, was here. And Florida, who also hired one of the historic powers in the league, who also brought a new head coach, was here. Ole Miss dominated the day, and I think justifiably so. It is After Further Review. Our show Open Every Day is brought to you by Bud Light. Drink easy with the great taste of Bud Light, the official beer of AFR, the official beer of your Fighting Tigers of LSU. We are inching closer, y'all. Inching closer to the start of the college football season, and whether you're going to be tailgating, whether you're going to be watching games with family and friends at your house, your favorite watering hole or sports bar or restaurant, make sure you drink plenty of delicious ice-cold Bud Light, the official beer of AFR, the official beer of your Fighting Tigers of LSU. All right, y'all, it is After Further Review. We're glad to have you hanging out with us here. We will knock out a quick break, and we'll continue. Again, a busy day here at SEC Football Media Days, as this finally felt like the heavy hitters were out for the first time this week, as it was a jam-packed day, sort of a star-studded day, all setting the stage for tomorrow when Lane Kiffin and the Circus will be here, and the day will wrap tomorrow with Arch Manning and the Texas Longhorns. So still a long way to go, but we're off and running on a hump day edition of AFR. Our coverage all week long is presented by FMOL Health, Our Lady of the Lake, Parish Construction and Roofing, Rev Fiber, and Relief Windows. We'll continue next.
AFR.
If you're thinking of putting in a pool, remember our friends over at Duplessis Builders. DuplessisPools.com, DuplessisPools.com. One more time, go to the website, DuplessisPools.com. I love telling you about Duplessis because they not only will build you a beautiful product, a premium product, the customer service experience is going to be outstanding. Let's be honest. You're building a pool, that is a very invasive experience. They are coming into your home and digging a big hole in your backyard, and it's not something that's done in a day or two. So you want a company that's going to do right by your family and be as unnoticeable as possible. And you want people who are going to be honest and respectful of the boundaries in your home and complete it in a timely manner and build you a beautiful pool. That's Duplessis, a top 50 pool builder in America, the only Louisiana company to earn that distinction this year from Pool & Spa Magazine. DuplessisPools.com.
After Further Review, presented by Goodwood Men's Sexual Wellness. Visit yourgoodwood.com. Live from the 2026 SEC Football Media Days in Tampa. Presented by FMOL Health, Our Lady of the Lake, Relief Windows, Rev Fiber, and Parish Construction and Roofing.
It's not been often in the last 2 decades that Alabama has been an afterthought, but that's oddly the circumstance today. For as long as Nick Saban was the coach at Alabama, the third day, typically Wednesday, is when Alabama came through, and it was Hail the Conquering Hero, and the king of college football came through, and everyone was going to, by default, vote Alabama to win the league because they had the best coach ever, the best roster, and that's just the way it was. Alabama was here today, and I guess that was kind of a story. Paul Feinbaum was on First Take earlier today, and listen to what he said about Kalen DeBoer.
Kalen DeBoer has just made a mess out of a great situation. He's lost 8 games in 2 years, as Stephen A. said. He lost to Florida State last year, which was total trash and should have fired his coach. He lost to Oklahoma at home. Yeah, he won a playoff game. He also was down 17. Oklahoma had a 17-0 lead and completely choked the game away, as Stephen and I both remember because we were talking during the game. But let's not get carried away with DeBoer. He's an excellent coach, but is he the right coach at Alabama?
Said that he has made a mess of Alabama. Now look, y'all know me. I'm a bald-headed dude that gets pretty emotional. I yell a lot, and I get red-faced, and I rant. And I've done my silly Bama is burning bit since quite literally the day Nick Saban announced his retirement, or the day Chris Lowe broke Nick Saban's retirement. This was the most predictable thing imaginable. It's why I was willing to act like a total over and over again doing that bit. And it's not that Kalen DeBoer is a bad coach. He's a good coach. And it's not that Alabama's bad. They're a good team and a good program. They went to the playoff a year ago. They won a playoff game. It's just that they had set a standard there that was unmatched relative to quite literally any other program ever, where the they won 6 national titles in 12 seasons. And the expectation there was every year to win a national championship, and it never felt unrealistic. No matter who they lost, players, coaches, didn't matter. It was never, ever, 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 ever going to match that with Kalen DeBoer or to quite literally anyone. You cannot lose the greatest coach ever and not miss a beat. Now, that's not to say you can't be good. You can't make a playoff. I'm not even saying they can't win a championship. They may. They may win one under Kalen DeBoer. I don't think that's going to happen. But you're looking at a situation where in year 1 under DeBoer, they lose the game to Vanderbilt, embarrassing. Last year, they lose the game to Florida State, embarrassing. They get skull-drugged by Indiana and Georgia Georgia in the SEC championship game, Indiana in the college football playoff, in the Rose Bowl. And there's no reason to believe it's going to be better this year. So could Bama go 10-2 again and make the SEC championship game, lose it, and then make the college football playoff and get hammered again? Sure. If your expectation this year for Alabama is to win a national championship, I don't know that I see that as a realistic possibility with turnover at quarterback to losing Ty Simpson, who was a first-rounder. You're going to be playing very likely a young player, Keelan Russell. It seems to be that's the guy they think is ultimately going to win that job. And against the schedule, which we'll run through in a little bit, that's challenging. I mean, every team in the SEC has a challenging schedule. The win-loss totals for Alabama this year, the over-under is 8.5. 8.5. You will have to go to pre-Saban, or maybe 2007, Saban's first year, to get a win total and over-under on Alabama that low. I mean, we are talking about, so when Paul Feinbaum says DeBoer made a mess at Alabama, he ain't wrong. We're talking about, they have dipped to a level they haven't been in 20 years. So, yeah, he's absolutely right. And the line of the day, for me, came from our friend Hunt Palmer. Hunt said Kalen DeBoer has the personality of a dial tone. I mean, to be clear, there are coaches who are really good orators, who are great communicators and good rah-rah guys, and can't coach a lick, can't recruit, can't run a program. I mean, there are dudes like that. And there are dudes that are, Bill Belichick is the greatest NFL coach ever. And, he would mumble in a press conference and he would barely ever raise his voice. And I think he would, that was Bill Belichick. So you don't have to be the rah-rah guy. Now, you can be a rah-rah guy and be great, but you don't have to be. There are many different ways. But Kalen DeBoer, is in a situation where, look, he ain't going nowhere, because they gave him a contract extension this year. Foolish. I cannot imagine why they would give him a contract extension, especially looking at the incredible buyout numbers around college football and watching a guy lose 4 games in consecutive years. You can convince yourself if you're Alabama that it's going great because you made the playoff and won a playoff game a year ago. But the other side of that coin is you've lost 4 games in consecutive years. Nick Saban did that one time in nearly 2 decades in Tuscaloosa. His first year never happened again. And that's the reality that they're facing. But whatever they do this year, it'll depend largely on their quarterback with Austin Mack and Keelan Russell, who are there. And Kalen DeBoer today was asked where both Mack and Russell are in their development here this offseason.
Yeah, guys that are in their different years as far as, Austin going into his 4th year, really the 4th year in this system. Keelan going into his 2nd, so there's a little bit of a difference there. I know that both of them would say what they know now versus what they even knew a year ago, especially in Keelan's case, when it comes to just football knowledge, of understanding of the offense, understanding of how you attack a defensive structure. Their reps have helped them really take these big jumps, especially in the last 5 months.
By the way, DeBoer did say that they will have the quarterback battle. They don't want it to go all the way up to and into the season. Presumably, they will pick a starter before then, but it's still something that is undecided as of this point. Talking to some of the folks who cover the program here this week, it seems as though the odds-on favorite to win that job is Keelan Russell, the former 5-star, the redshirt freshman. So we'll see, or if it's the veteran Austin Mack, who's in a very similar situation this year that obviously Ty Simpson was a year ago, a guy who stayed, waited his turn, and had great success. Maybe Austin Mack will be that, but more than likely it'll be Keelan Russell, the 5-star. And Muse, I want to play 10 if we could. The other thing I thought was interesting with Kalen DeBoer today was talking about where we started, right, where this event typically was sort of the Alabama Invitational forever. Alabama was the crown jewel of this event for 2 decades. And they weren't even the headliner today. I mean, Ole Miss coming in here was the team everybody wanted to talk to. So in many respects, yes, Alabama is flying under the radar as a team that's projected to go over under 8.5 wins. And Kalen DeBoer was asked that if he feels like his team is sort of flying under the radar.
Yeah, I mean, I understand why with a lot of new faces, and that's okay because we got to go prove it. We do. We got to go out and we got to get the job done. That's really how I feel every year. It doesn't matter how many guys you returned. Last year we returned, I think it was at 16 seniors, and we had to go prove it. We had to do some things, not just talk it. We had to go decide what we were going to accomplish and commit to the process, commit to what we needed to do to get it done, then make sure that the action supported the goals that we had. And so this team has a lot of new faces. For us, we felt, again, we took some good steps in the right direction a year ago. We feel like there's a foundation of toughness and resiliency, as I mentioned earlier, but there's also some things that we got to continue to get better. So until we prove it, we understand where there's going to be doubt because those expectations, as we talked about, are extremely high in the program.
Our buddy Ryan Fowler from Tide 92.9 in Tuscaloosa, he'll visit with us a little bit later. We'll get sort of an Alabama perspective on this team in the program right now. But when you look at that schedule for Alabama and you look at the 8.5, by the way, I do think there is value over 8.5 with Bama. So you go East Carolina, at Kentucky, which should be a win, home against Florida State, which, again, they lost a year ago, but that game is now in Tuscaloosa, and you would presume they'll have their full attention. Home against South Carolina, at Mississippi State. They should be favored in each of their first 5 games, and they'll need to win all 5 of those games if they fancy themselves as a playoff team. Because if you lose any of at Kentucky, home against Florida State, home against South Carolina, at Mississippi State, then there really isn't a path to the playoff. Because then it's Georgia. And I understand that DeBoer has played Georgia 3 times, beat them twice in the regular season. They got their head kicked in the SEC championship last year. But you go Georgia, at Tennessee, home against A&M, open date at LSU. So think about that. Georgia, at Tennessee, A&M, at LSU. There's a chance after being favored in each of their first 5 games, they could well be an underdog in each of the next 4. At Tennessee will be interesting to see what the Vols are this year. We talked about them earlier this week. But, again, They'll likely be favored in their first 5, but they could be underdogs in each of the next 4. And then down the stretch, you go at Vanderbilt, or they lost 2 years ago, but at Vanderbilt, freshman quarterback, they'll be favored at Vanderbilt, home against Chattanooga, home against Auburn, and Alex Golesh's first year. So they should be favored in their final 3. So again, you look at Bama, and I get why you look at the 8.5, because you're looking at that 4-game stretch in the middle, Georgia at Tennessee, A&M at LSU, and the question is, do they go 3-1? Do they go 2-2? Do they go 1-3? Like, that's where you're going to fall somewhere on that number if chalk holds the rest of the way and they start 5-0 and win their last 3. Like, that's your 8, right? So it's like, do you think they can make it through that stretch 3-1? Georgia at Tennessee, Texas A&M at LSU. If not, then you play the under. So it will be this could be a fascinating year. Should be a fascinating year in Tuscaloosa, because the noise is getting louder as Bama has in the national scene regressed, and it's around Kalen DeBoer. And there's nowhere for Bama to go because of the contract extension they gave DeBoer. So if it is another year where, let's say hypothetically, they go 8-4 in the regular season, well, now that's back-to-back 4-loss seasons, and you have completely fallen from the elite, not only in the conference, but nationally. So, and you're sort of stuck. And then maybe you're talking about coordinator changes or whatever you have to do to try to influence some type of change within the program. But for Kalen DeBoer, this is a massive season as Alabama is trying to get back into the conversation of the national elite, and I just don't see the path for Alabama to do that. So, of course, we will follow it here from SEC Media Days, and all season long. Tide will be in Baton Rouge on November the 7th. All right, it's After Further Review. Thanks for hanging out with us here on Radio Row from SEC Football Media Days. Ross Dellinger is going to join us in 30 minutes from right now, right at the top of hour number 2. We're brought to you by Parish Restoration. ParishRestoration.com. ParishRestoration.com. We say it every day. Kill mold, remove odor, other harmful pathogens. That's our friends over at Parish Restoration. If you have mold or think you might, you want Parish. It's mold remediation done right the first time. So you get water intrusion. I mean, look, when you start to notice that water spot on your ceiling, that didn't start today. You've probably had a slow drip for a long time. Well, what else is wet in your attic? You have insulation that's wet. Well, that could be a breeding ground for mold. Wet, humid, mold. Let our friends at Parish Restoration come help you out. ParishRestoration.com. ParishRestoration.com. All right, y'all, it is After Further Review. Thanks for hanging out with us here on this Wednesday edition of AFR. The Football Tigers will be here in Tampa tomorrow to wrap up SEC Football Media Days. We'll look forward to that. But a lot to talk about today, including Jon Sumrall and the Florida Gators, Mike Elko and the Texas A&M Aggies taking their turn as well. When we come back, we did hear from the new head coach of the Florida Gators, Jon Sumrall, as Florida is looking for a bounce back in relevance after Billy Napier 2 years ago thought he was breaking through, and then the massive disappointment a season ago, the collapse, the 4-8, which ultimately led to Napier's firing, and now Jon Sumrall taking over in charge with getting Florida back to national relevance. We'll hear from the head coach of the Florida Gators when we continue on AFR.
AFR.
Love telling you about our friends over at River City's 1 Hour Air, where they're always on time, or you don't pay a dime. 752-0001, 752-0001, 752-0001, where they're always on time, or you don't pay a dime. Hey, remember, if your AC isn't keeping up, our friends at River City's 1 Hour Air can help. So give them a shout at 752-0001. Look for the big yellow vans and trucks with the giant clock on the side. And one of the things that I love to remind you all the time is that they're never going to overcharge you. They're going to force a service on you. They're going to come and give you a good, better, and best option, and you decide. Do you want to do a full unit replacement, or do you want to do these small repairs to help just extend the life of your unit? Whatever the case may be, they'll give you all the options, and you decide what's best for you. It's River City's 1 Hour Air, serving the Baton Rouge area for 40 years. 752-0001, 752-0001, 752-0001 for River City's 1 Hour Air, where they're always on time, or you don't pay a dime.
Tell you every day, better coverage for less money. And man, my friends over at Insurance Network of Louisiana are crushing it for Louisianians on their auto insurance right now. Listen, if you have not had anyone shop for your auto insurance lately, you got to call Insurance Network of Louisiana. My goodness. They got some top-rated companies, Geico, Progressive, they're doing awesome work right now. This was an amazing story that I heard. They wrote one last week, saved the client $2,911 annually. They had a high auto rate with State Farm. They smashed it with Geico. They had another one save $1,476 annually with Progressive. They had Allstate and switched. Y'all, I tell you all the time, if you're just auto-renewing your insurance, man, you're probably overpaying and you're underinsured. Let Insurance Network of Louisiana help. lainsurance.net.
After further review, presented by Goodwood Men's Sexual Wellness. Visit yourgoodwood.com. Live from the 2026 SEC Football Media Days in Tampa. Presented by FMOL Health, Our Lady of the Lake, Relief Windows, Rev Fiber, and Parish Construction and Roofing.
I grew up in SEC territory. I grew up in Huntsville, Alabama. I was born in Texarkana, Texas, but raised in North Alabama. And as a kid, growing up, there were three conferences in football in my mind. There was the NFC, the AFC, and the SEC. That's all I knew. And so to be an SEC head coach right now for me is very surreal.
Florida head coach Jon Sumrall, his inaugural SEC Football Media Days. There's an interesting tidbit about Sumrall is that he's the only coach currently in the FBS to have gone to 4 conference championship games representing 2 different schools, doing so at Troy and at Tulane. So the 2 places he has been as a head coach prior to Florida, he has had great success, as we well know. From his time there, uptown New Orleans with the Green Wave, and before that with Troy. And now the onus is on Jon Sumrall to get Florida back to relevancy. And so he was here today. But there's a giant question there at Florida as well, like similarly with Alabama about what this means at quarterback. Who is going to run the show? And Philo, the quarterback who comes in from Georgia Tech with the new offensive coordinator, that should, in the same way that Alex Golish and Byron Brown, having been paired together at South Florida, that should work in Florida's benefit, bringing offensive coordinator and quarterback together from Georgia Tech. Now, there's a caveat because we said the same thing a year ago about Ben Arbuckle and John Mateer at Oklahoma coming in from Washington State. And the early returns were good, but then Mateer got hurt, and how much of the offensive, wane in the second, the after the first month of the season was because of the injury. How much was it they just weren't hitting their stride? It wasn't just Mateer's injury; they were incapable of running the ball. It was bad all the way around. But you would think that should ease some of the transition there in Gainesville. But typically you look at quarterback and defensive line play, right? If you look at those 2 things as being there, you're going to be pretty good. It's one of the reasons I'm higher on Texas A&M, who we'll talk about a little bit later. You've got Marcel Reed, and despite the fact that you lost a bunch in the draft and the transfer portal, Mike Elko rebuilt. And I always trust Mike Elko to have good defense. So that being the case, I look at Florida and I go, man, you don't have quarterback settled, and you lose Caleb Banks and you lose transfers on the defensive line. You're probably not going to be very good there. So if you can't stop the run or rush the passer, and you're not very good at quarterback, I don't know that you can be very good. I think Jon Sumrall in time can be very good. How much can he improve here in year 1? Now, the other part of the Jon Sumrall conversation, we'll come back to Florida here, like this season here in a second. But the other part of the Jon Sumrall conversation, obviously, is how linked he is to the Lane Kiffin hire. And so in the same way that, when Brian Kelly showed up at LSU and Lincoln Riley went to Southern Cal, we look at those hires when they're made, and you almost innately have to compare their times at their spots against each other. Like, we will do that now for with Lane Kiffin and Pete Golding, how their tenures go at their respective schools. But Jon Sumrall's in that mix as well. And we covered that story so closely. Sumrall probably would. Ole Miss certainly would have preferred Jon Sumrall, not landing Lane Kiffin. But they allowed the Kiffin saga to extend it so long that Sumrall had to make a decision, and he had the bird in hand with Florida, and he took it. And that left Ole Miss with only Alex Golesh as an option, and people close to that program were not very high on that option, so they decided to promote the popular assistant instead. And again, we'll see if it works with Golding long term. But Sumrall is a guy who was not an outlandish thought that he could have landed at Ole Miss or at Auburn if Auburn wanted to get involved in the Jon Sumrall sweepstakes. But ultimately, Kiffin at LSU, Golding at Ole Miss, Sumrall at Florida. I think each of the programs feel good about where they are with their new head coach. But Sumrall was asked today in the main room. But he was great in the main room today, by the way. I mean, he dropped a few expletives up there. Somebody's phone rang down during the press conference, and he's like, "You'd be kicked out of my meeting, right? Taking everything out to throw this podium at you right now." Jon Sumrall is all energy. Anyway, he was asked about the conversations he had with Lane during the coaching search.
Lane and I are friends, and Lane and I talked several times through the process of October, November about what it was looking like for both of our schedules of how things were going to unfold. No two situations are different. Lane and I talked as we were going through it. He's like, "You and I are going through the same thing in November." I'm like, "No, Lane, we're not. If you leave, you're leaving an SEC school to go to an SEC school. It's a little different. I'm leaving Tulane." But it was challenging to do it. I wouldn't have done it any other way. I may have, on the front end of taking this job, maybe not been at my best every second for Florida because I wanted to make sure I left Tulane the right way. I did not envy Lane's situation at all. Every time he and I would talk, I felt awful for what he was going through and everybody involved because it wasn't fair to anyone.
By the way, what Sumrall was alluding to there on the front end of that was saying, when Lane was saying we're going through the same thing, meaning leaving a playoff team. And what Sumrall was saying is, no, I'd be leaving Tulane. Tulane would absolutely let Sumrall coach its team in the playoff and was right to do it. There was no way Ole Miss was ever going to let Lane Kiffin coach its team while taking the LSU job. That's no different than Bob Chesney coaching James Madison, knowing he's going to UCLA. When you are very clearly leaving for a step up, then it's we wish you well, coach, on your way out the door. Thank you for what you did here. That is not the vibe that happened at Ole Miss. So for Jon Sumrall, he's landed at this spot in Gainesville with the Florida Gators. And my goodness, he's got a lot of work to do. This is a heavy lift. And Sumrall was pretty candid, when he talked about the offensive line play when he arrived at Florida before the spring.
We've only got two guys that really started football games at all at the University of Florida that are returners, so it's a very new group. This is a line of scrimmage game. This is a line of scrimmage league, but I don't care what league you're in, you better be good on the line of scrimmage. And I've been really pleased with the growth of our offensive line this summer, in particular the weight room. That was probably my greatest disappointment when I took the job and started to watch our team work. The strength of our O-line was underwhelming. Those guys have embraced the challenge. They've worked incredibly hard. I think we got great leadership in that room. Two transfers that have really, I think, set the standard of how we work. Harrison Moore, offensive center from Georgia Tech, and TJ Shanahan, offensive guard from Penn State, have both kind of elevated maybe the rhythm that room marches to.
How quickly can they put it all together? One of the other interesting tidbits there with Florida, and I don't mind sharing this with you at all, is that Jaden Baugh, their fantastic running back who's here today. Jaden Baugh did flirt with the idea of going into the transfer portal and ultimately made the decision to stay at Florida. And that's something he was asked about today, was that decision to stay in Gainesville.
Just being a Gator is everything to me. And being able to just, play for the fans that support us when we're down, up, regardless. They came around and embraced me with open arms just to keep going. And I feel like that's the greatest thing to me, so that's why I stayed.
Jaden Baugh, a season ago, ran for 1,170 yards. Remember, it was DJ Lagway's team. Lagway. at Baylor now, but 16 touchdowns, 14 picks for Lagway was just a huge problem a season ago for Florida. But Baugh ran for 1,170 yards and 8 touchdowns. He averaged almost 5.5 yards per carry. So getting Jaden Baugh back behind that remade offensive line is a big deal for Jon Sumrall and the Florida Gators in this debut season. When you look at their schedule, they have an opportunity to ease into the season, right? There's so much new quarterback, new offensive line, new defensive front. They open up with FAU and then Campbell, the Camels. So they'll start 2-0, and they have a couple of weeks to sort of iron out the kinks before they go on the road to Auburn. Now, same with Auburn, right? I mean, it's a road game for Florida, but it's at Jordan-Hare Stadium. But Auburn has still got a lot of new as well with Alex Golesh. And then they're home against Ole Miss, at Missouri, home against South Carolina. Florida's got to make their hay in that first half of the season. And I would say, with the exception of playing Ole Miss, look, it's not good. They might be underdogs at Auburn. They might be underdogs at Missouri. But Florida Atlantic, Campbell, at Auburn, Ole Miss, at Missouri, South Carolina. That's the first half of the season. If they can make it through the first half, 4-2 or 5-1, I think it's a big win because the gauntlet comes. After that, it's at Texas, Georgia, Oklahoma. That 3-week stretch is going to be brutal. They'll very likely be 0-3 in that stretch. And then they finish at Kentucky, Vandy, at Florida State. 2 of the final 3 on the road. And who knows what to expect from Kentucky with a new coach, Vandy without Diego Pavia, or Florida State, who I don't know, Mike Norvell may be fired by that point, or maybe it's a resurgent Florida State team. We'll see. But that is in Tallahassee. So when you look at the Gators in year one, I think getting to 500 for this is not what Florida wants to hear, but getting to 500 would feel like the baseline expectation, especially considering you have a way to ease into the season. But really, if you can get to 7 this year, in year one under Jon Sumrall, it feels like that would feel like a great win for the Gators in year one under Jon Sumrall. All right, it is After Further Review. We're glad to have you hanging out with us here on this Hump Day edition of AFR. Coverage here from SEC Football Media Days brought to you by FMOL Health, Our Lady of the Lake, championship health partner of LSU Athletics, Rev Fiber, Relief Windows, and Parish Construction and Roofing. Member of Parish Construction and Roofing, Friday is the deadline to enter our Fortified Roof giveaway. One Baton Rouge area homeowner, one New Orleans area homeowner will win a fortified roof courtesy of Parish Construction Roofing and our great partner Drew Brees. So we're looking forward to announcing that next week, but the deadline to enter is Friday. So go to parishbuilt.com, parishbuilt.com. Do business with someone you know, Parish Construction and Roofing. Okay, it is After Further Review, day 3 here from Radio Row at SEC Football Media Days. You'll hear conversations with Billy Lucci from TexAgs, our buddy Frank Frangi from 1010XL in Jacksonville, talking about the Florida Gators. Ryan Fowler, our buddy from Tide 92.9 in Tuscaloosa, talking about the Alabama Crimson Tide. And Ross Dellinger is coming up here in about a dozen minutes from right now to kick off hour number 2. Quick thought on the Texas A&M Aggies when we come back to wrap up hour number 1 here from Radio Row at SEC Football Media Days.
After Further Review.
If you're thinking of selling your home, call Darren James and get your home sold. 335-7666, 335-7666, 335-7666, or agent225.com, agent225.com. When you work with Darren James, you're working with the best. Not my opinion. Wall Street Journal's Real Trends list of the top 1% of realtors in America. Darren James in the top 20 of that list in America, number 13 in the country last year. So if you need to sell your home, hire the realtor that gets to a closing table more than any other realtor in America. Hire Darren James. Agent225.com. Agent225.com for Darren James.
Think real estate. Think Darren James.
After Further Review, presented by Goodwood Men's Sexual Wellness. Visit yourgoodwood.com. Live from the 2026 SEC Football Media Days in Tampa. Presented by FMOL Health, Our Lady of the Lake, Relief Windows, Rev Fiber, and Parish Construction and
Been really excited with Tyree. Obviously, what made us want to go get him is he's got prototypical length and athleticism for a tackle in this conference. He has some starting experience under his belt. We felt like we could help him take his game to the next level. I think that's one of the reasons why we went after him, and maybe one of the reasons why he selected us. And we expect him to be in a very, very strong competition to play a major role on our offensive line this year.
It's Mike Elko talking about former LSU offensive lineman Tyree Adams, who made the jump to Texas A&M in the transfer portal. So interesting, when you think about Tyree Adams, Cohen Eccles jumping to Texas A&M as well. It's such an illustration of Lane Kiffin and the staff, their decision to make over the entire offensive line unit. And of course, Adams was a part of that, a guy who played left tackle for LSU a season ago and now is going to head into College Station and see if he can earn or win a job there. And over the course of 3 seasons in Baton Rouge, Adams played in 18 games. He made 11 starts. He played in just 1 game as a freshman in 23, played in 8 games with 2 starts in 2024, and then this past year played in 9 games, starting all 9 before he was injured in that game against Vanderbilt. But Adams is sort of indicative of a change at Texas A&M, but also at LSU. Now, one thing A&M certainly has going for it is Marcel Reed returning, and that's something we are going to talk about with Billy Lucci from Texags that you're going to hear coming up in hour number 2. Ross Dellinger is going to be here as well, but you're going to see a lot of those names from the conference popping up all season long because a lot of those offensive linemen jump to different spots in the SEC, and some we'd kind of forgotten about, and even players like Nick Anderson going to Kentucky, who we talked about earlier this week with Will Stein, the new head coach at Kentucky. So a ton to dive into here as we move throughout the next couple hours of our Day 3 coverage from Radio Row at SEC Football Media Days. But Ross Dellinger of Yahoo is doing a great job covering all the ancillary things in sports, which are kind of the biggest sports topics going on right now with Congress. We're going to get to that here coming up right after the top of the hour. So we'll knock out a break. Our coverage brought to you by FMOL Health, Our Lady of the Lake, championship health partner of LSU Athletics, Rev Fiber, Relief Windows, and Parish Construction and Roofing. Ross Dellinger, who's just about to sit down, will be with us coming up right after Sports Center. So we'll get you caught up on national headlines, and we'll talk to Deli next on AFR.
After further review.
If you're thinking of buying land, your first call should be to First South Farm Credit, firstsouthfarmcredit.com, firstsouthfarmcredit.com. For more than 100 years, First South Farm Credit has done one thing, and they've done it better than anyone else. They help Louisianians buy land, and it's not just in Louisiana. This is important. They can sell you land anywhere and help you finance land anywhere in the lower 48. And they got more than 40 branches in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. So you can go to the website, firstsouthfarmcredit.com, firstsouthfarmcredit.com, firstsouthfarmcredit.com. So if you're interested in connecting with a loan officer in an area near you who can help you buy 20 acres in St. Francisville, 100 acres at hunting camp in Texas, or 1,000 acres for a ranch in Idaho, whatever, they can help you at First South Farm Credit. Make sure your first call is to First South Farm Credit. Log on to firstsouthfarmcredit.com. One more time, firstsouthfarmcredit.com.